Hey there, and welcome back to Utility Sports. In today's video, we are covering a very important topic, and that is Kirk Cousins. Is it possible that he goes to the San Francisco 49ers? There's a lot of buzz surrounding this rumor. I think there is a little bit of legitimacy to this case for him becoming a San Francisco 49er. There's a lot of connecting pieces, and there's a lot of reason to believe that the speculation could be true as the offseason continues to progress, as we get a little bit closer to the actual NFL draft. Something's got to materialize quickly, in my opinion, in order to move forward. So if we look at the last 2 years of Kirk Cousins, you will see a 21-12 record, completed about 66% of his passes, almost 8,800 yards, 62 touchdowns, 21 interceptions. So those are the main numbers for him. When you look statistically at what Kirk Cousins brings to the table, he's an efficient passer. He's not turnover prone. He's a guy that puts up a lot of big numbers. Now, the main criticism of Kirk Cousins is his inability to win a primetime game. This has been well documented, dating all the way back to his days in Washington. Now it has been a cloud over him in Minnesota. In his career, more specifically in the postseason, he has one big win. That's when he went down to New Orleans and beat Drew Brees and the Saints in that playoff game. He had an awesome, terrific game there. Overall, when you look at what he brings to the table, is a steady quarterback that needs some support to win. And I think when you look at the infrastructure of what the San Francisco 49ers have to offer, this could be a perfect storm, in my opinion. When you look at the actual playmakers, the offensive line, the running game, the defense is phenomenal. Everything has to come together in almost a perfect storm in order for Kirk Cousins to make a very deep postseason run. They had the infrastructure to push Brock Purdy deep into the postseason last year, and I think the same could continue here if they bring on Kirk Cousins. Now, once again, this is a very hot topic, and we're going to get into now why the speculation is the way it is. Some of the big signs, Mike Florio reporting that executives have been hearing chatter that it is a real possibility, and this occurred at the NFL Combine. A lot of different executives were thinking about the possibility that Kirk Cousins could finally be reunited with Kyle Shanahan. I think Kyle Shanahan has been a big fan of Kirk Cousins ever since their time together in Washington, and I think it's evident that each of them have respect for one another. And I think that this could be a monumental move. Now, it really, I don't question the credibility of some of the reporting on this one. We also have to consider that the San Francisco 49ers have been dipping their toe in on the Aaron Rodgers sweepstakes all of a sudden. We've heard recently that Mac Jones was in the discussions. I don't know how much I believe that one. I do remember that Kyle Shanahan thought Mac Jones was a terrific quarterback. I'm not exactly sure in how that would play out. Nevertheless, maybe there could be some interesting swap there, for quarterbacks. We'll get into that a little bit later on, but I'm just kind of looking at this from a credibility standpoint. Mike Florio has some great connections, especially with, executive scouts, things of that nature. He's done some nice reporting, and I think that there is a legitimate argument that there have been some conversations centered around that. You look at the general manager, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah has not been afraid to move on from what Rick Spielman has put into place. It's been pretty blatantly obvious that, especially this offseason, moving on from higher priced veterans in order for a potential youth movement that you could be seeing in Minnesota. You look at the longtime Viking, Eric Kendricks. Patrick Peterson is another one that is now out the door in terms of them shedding some veterans. But a lot of Rick Spielman's core is kind of diminished at this point, and I think there are some more moves to come. They're trying to get their own identity. They're trying to do their own thing. Rick Spielman had constructed most of this roster in terms of the actual talent. There was a lot of it on there. Now you're starting to see that diminish because of the salary cap situation. So what can this potential trade look like? I think the Minnesota Vikings could receive Trey Lance and a third-round pick. And I think that the 49ers could be receiving Kirk Cousins and a 6th-round draft pick. Now, getting into the actual compensation of it, I think this makes a lot of sense for both parties. I don't think there's a ton of belief in the San Francisco organization that Trey Lance is their future franchise quarterback. It has never really felt that way almost from day one. I feel like there's been some sort of a disconnect between the coaching staff and the front office in terms of how they felt about Trey Lance. I feel like the front office was a little bit more in on him in terms of his actual upside and what he could potentially bring to the table. I think the coaching staff has seen a couple of different things. Maybe they didn't love, whether that be in practice games. They did not absolutely fall in love with Trey Lance, I don't think. Now, this is pure speculation on my own part. However, I think this is a real possibility. I look at the Minnesota Vikings as a team that desperate for a youth movement, desperate to open up some money to be able to, pay other certain positions. I think Dalvin Cook is in his final year with the Minnesota Vikings. I think that they're going to continue to move off of higher price veteran players on roster. I think Trey Lance is the perfect transitional quarterback here. In terms of actual value, it's very tough because the 49ers gave up a ton to move up to go get their guy in Trey Lance. Big time arm, phenomenal athlete, but we have to remember he had that one sole year at NDSU that was able to essentially, catapult him to that third overall spot. Overall, Trey Lance, fun prospect, but I think there's some key issues that maybe people aren't able to highlight. He hasn't been able to stay healthy either. He's had some health concerns. But I think this is a trade that makes sense because we're looking at a team that could win a Super Bowl right now in the San Francisco 49ers. Them getting Kirk Cousins, a guy that can make all the throws when given time. That's the whole key in this. When given time, he is one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL in terms of ball placement, accuracy. That's what Kirk Cousins brings to the table. Putting him on a roster that's ready to win right now and could win a Super Bowl this season is the perfect situation for him. And I think when you look at the 49ers, that is kind of what they're missing. Sure, they were able to do, well last year with Brock Purdy, but is that sustainable? Is that going to be the case? Is his arm going to be the same after his injury? I think there's a lot of question marks that you have to raise with the current quarterback situation in San Fran. And when you have a roster that's so good right now and your contracts are somewhat lining up to, try to make a big run, I think it makes sense to go and get that quote franchise guy, the guy that, could potentially take you to that next level. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, well, Kirk Cousins doesn't win big games and things of that nature. I think it's a little overstated, a little overblown, but with this team, he can potentially go all the way. The Minnesota Vikings do this by picking up a better asset, upgrading their 6th to a 3rd round pick. And they also go ahead and get Trey Lance, a promising young starter who could eventually, be that true franchise quarterback for them. A guy that is actually originally from Marshall, Minnesota. So he's actually a hometown kid, would be able to, play for the team that, he grew up watching as a kid. Trey Lance, the Minnesota Vikings, is a beautiful culmination of what could potentially be. You put him on the same timeline as Justin Jefferson, and this could be a dynamic quarterback wide receiver duo. And then you look on the flip side, Kirk Cousins going to the 49ers, being a part of a nice veteran group that could potentially win it all. To me, this is a formula for success for both parties. Now, some of the other factors that go into it is what's the current quarterback market? Previously mentioned, Mac Jones potentially being traded. Aaron Rodgers is still in the trade market. It all kind of depends on how things fall there. I know Kyle Shanahan really liked Mac Jones, and obviously Aaron Rodgers is a quarterback that you could feel super confident going into this season and potentially winning a Super Bowl with. So what does that quarterback look like? Is there an extension in place for Kirk Cousins at the time of the trade? I think there would have to be, in terms of, getting a deal done, making sure that he's with the 49ers long term. I think that is a big factor that goes into it. And then San Francisco having to rework some money in order to fit Kirk Cousins' contract into that timeline. And a little mistake there, belief in Brock Purdy. I think that, they have a little bit of confidence here with Brock Purdy. But once again, how's the injury looking? Are there some concerns that we have? And once again, do you, as the Minnesota Vikings, have confidence in Trey Lance? It's a big question mark. It's a big question mark for a team that just got done winning the division. Do you think you can win the division again with Trey Lance as your starting quarterback, a guy we haven't been able to see a ton of could be a big seismic shift in terms of how the North plays out next season. I feel like the Vikings would have a really good chance with Kirk Cousins at quarterback, and Trey Lance, you have to have some question marks just because of the uncertainty of what could potentially happen this upcoming season. Thanks again, guys, for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the content. I had a lot of fun making this video. Let me know in the comments section below, what should a Kirk Cousins trade look like? Curious to see where you think the value would be for him. Once again, thanks for stopping by, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.